And sure, a lot of people will say you need more experience. But let me tell you something. 10 more years in the Senate won't make you a better president. You get people motivated, especially young people, minorities, even middle-of-the-road white people.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name's Heero. This is the Identity Booth. No, this is not the Identity Booth. This is the Stranger's comic book, and I'm drawing right now while listening to Barack Obama talk for the next 30 minutes. I made a promise. I made a pledge, a commitment that I would draw once a week for 1 hour. And that promise is being self-realized as we speak. So I will be drawing for the next 1 hour. Don't expect me to say much. But I'll be checking the chats from time to time, but it's not a priority of mine. You guys, I don't know. I don't want to get copyright struck, so I'm gonna probably turn off my mic. But I'll be in the chat, periodically speaking. No one's watching this anyway, so hey.
That's different, you see. People are looking for something different. Sure, it'll be hard, but I think you can win. Schumer thinks so too. He stood up and headed toward the door, making it clear the meeting was over. Well, that's all I want to tell you. So think about it, okay? I left his office stunned. As good a relationship as I developed with Harry, I knew him to be the most practical of politicians. Walking down the stairs, I wondered if there was some angle to what he had said, some sophisticated game he was playing that I was too dim to recognize. But when I later talked to Chuck Schumer, and then to Dick Durbin, they delivered the same message. The country was desperate for a new voice. I would never be in a better position to run than I was now. And with my connection with young voters, minorities, and independents, I might broaden the map in a way that could help other Democrats down the ballot. I didn't share these conversations beyond my senior staff and closest friends, feeling as if I had stepped into a minefield and should make it sudden moves. As I mulled it all over with Pete, he suggested I have one more conversation before I consider taking a more serious look at what a race would entail. You need to talk to Kennedy, he said. He knows all the players, he's run himself. He'll give you some perspective, and at the very least, he'll tell you if he plans to support anyone else. Heir to the most famous name in American politics, Ted Kennedy was by then the closest thing Washington had to a living legend. During more than 4 decades in the Senate, he'd been at the forefront of every major progressive cause, from civil rights to minimum wage to healthcare. His great bulk, huge head, and mane of white hair filled every room he walked into. He was the rare senator who commanded attention whenever he gingerly rose from his seat in the chamber, searching his suit pocket for his glasses or his notes. That iconic Boston baritone launching each speech with, "Thank you, Madam President." The argument would have spooled, the face reddening, the voice rising, building to a crescendo like a revivalist film. No matter how mundane the issue at hand, then the speech would end. The curtain would come down, and he would become the old avuncular Teddy again, wandering down the aisle, check on the roll call, or sit next to a colleague, his hand on her shoulder or forearm, whispering in their ear or breaking into a hearty laugh. The kind that made you not care that he was probably softening you up for some future vote that you might need. Teddy's office on the 3rd floor of the Russell Senate office building was a reflection of the man, charming and full of history. her asleep. I came into the den where she was watching TV and muted the sound. You know I didn't plan any of this, I said, sitting down next to her on the couch. Michelle stared at the silent screen. I know, she said. I realized we barely had time to catch our breath, and until a few months ago, the idea of me running seemed crazy. Yeah. But given everything that's happened, I feel like we've got to give the idea a serious look. I've asked the team to put together a presentation. What a campaign schedule would look like, whether we could win, how it might affect the family. I mean, if we're ever going to do this, Michelle cut me off. Her voice choked with emotion. Did you say we? She said. You mean you, Barack? Not we. This is your thing. I've supported you the whole time because I believe in you, even though I hate politics. I hate the way it exposes our family. You know that. And now, finally, we have some stability, even if it's still not normal. Not the way I choose for us to live. And now you tell me you're going to run for president? I reached for her hand. I didn't say I am running, honey. I just said we can't dismiss the possibility. But I can only consider it if you're on board. I paused, seeing that none of her anger was dissipating. If you don't think we should, then we won't. Simple as that. You get the final say. Michelle lifted her eyebrows as if to suggest she didn't believe me. If that's really true, then the answer is no, she said. I don't want you to run for president, at least not now. She gave me a hard look and got up from the couch. God, Barack, when's it going to be enough? Before I could answer, she'd gone into the bedroom and closed the door. How could I blame her for feeling this way? By even suggesting the possibility of a run, by involving my staff before I'd asked for her blessing, I'd put her in an impossible spot. For years now, I'd asked Michelle for fortitude and forbearance when it came to my political endeavors. She'd given it, reluctantly, but with love. And then each time I'd come back again, asking for more. Why would I put her through this? Was it just vanity? Or perhaps something darker? A raw hunger? A blind ambition wrapped in the gauzy language of service? Or was I still trying to prove myself worthy to a father who had abandoned me, live up to my mother's starry-eyed expectations for her only son, and resolve whatever self-doubt remained from being born a child of mixed race? So I could have a hole to fill, Michelle had told me early in our marriage, after a stretch in which she had watched me work myself to near exhaustion. That's why you can't slow down. In truth, I thought I'd resolved those issues long ago, finding affirmation in my work, security and love in my family. But I wondered now if I could ever really escape whatever it was in me that needed healing, whatever kept me reaching for more. Maybe it was impossible to disentangle one's motives. I recall the sermon by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called The Drum Major Instinct. In it, he talks about how, deep down, we all want to be first, celebrated for our greatness. We all want to lead the parade. He goes on to point out that such selfish impulses can be reconciled by aligning that quest for greatness.
That's a great speech. I love that speech.
First in service, first in love. For me, it seemed a satisfying way to square the circle when it came to one's baser and higher instincts. Except now I was also confronting the obvious fact that the sacrifices were never mine alone. Family got dragged along for the ride, put in the line of fire. Dr. King's cause and his gifts might have justified such sacrifice. But could mine? I didn't know. Whatever the nature of my faith, I couldn't take refuge in the notion of God calling me to run for president. I couldn't pretend to be simply responding to some invisible pull of the universe. I couldn't claim I was indispensable to the cause of freedom and justice, or deny responsibility for the burden I'd be placing on my family. Circumstances may have opened the door to a presidential race, but nothing during these months had prevented me from closing it. I could easily close the door still, and the fact that I hadn't, that instead I had allowed the door to open wider, was all Michelle needed to know. If one of the qualifications of running for the most powerful office in the world was megalomania, it appeared I was passing the test. Such thoughts colored my mood as I left in August for a 17-day tour through Africa. In South Africa, I took the boat ride out to Robben Island and stood in the tiny cell where Nelson Mandela had passed most of his 27 years in prison, keeping his faith that change would come. I met with members of the South African Supreme Court, spoke with doctors at an HIV/AIDS clinic, and spent time with Bishop Desmond Tutu, whose joyful spirit I had gotten to know during his visits to Washington. So is it true, Barack, he said with an impish smile, that you are going to be our first African president of the United States? Ah, that would make us all very proud. From South Africa, I flew to Nairobi, where Michelle and the girls, accompanied by her friend Anita Blanchard and her children, joined me. Abetted by wall-to-wall coverage in the local press, the Kenyan response to our presence was over the top. A visit to Kibera, one of Africa's largest shantytowns, drew thousands who packed themselves along the winding paths of red dirt, chanting my name. My half-sister Alma had thoughtfully organized a family trip to Nyanza province so we could introduce Malia and Sasha to our father's ancestral home in the western region of the country. Traveling there, we were surprised to see people lined up and waving along miles of highway. And when Michelle and I stopped at a mobile health clinic to publicly take an HIV test as a means of demonstrating its safety, a crowd of thousands showed up, swamping our vehicle and giving the diplomatic security team a real scare. Only when we were on safari, parked among the lions and wildebeest, did we escape the commotion. I swear, Barack, these folks think you're already president, Anita joked one evening. Just reserve me a seat on Air Force One, okay? Neither Michelle nor I laughed. While the family headed back to Chicago, I continued on, traveling to the Kenya-Somali border to get briefed on U.S.-Kenya cooperation against the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, taking a helicopter from Djibouti to Ethiopia, where U.S. military personnel were assisting flood relief efforts, and finally flying into Chad to visit refugees from Darfur. At each stop, I saw men and women engaged in heroic work, in impossible circumstances. At each stop, I was told how much more America could be doing to help relieve the suffering. And at each stop, I was asked if I was running for president. Just days after my return to the States, I flew to Iowa to give a keynote speech at Senator Tom Harkin's annual steak fry, a ritual that took on added importance in the run-up to the presidential elections, given that Iowa was always the first state to vote in the primary process. I accepted the invitation months earlier. Tom had asked me to speak precisely to avoid having to choose between all the presidential aspirants who coveted the slot. But now my appearance only fueled speculation. As we were leaving the fairgrounds following my speech, I was pulled aside by Steve Hildebrand, a former political director for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and an old Iowa hand who'd been enlisted by Pete to show me around. "That's the hottest reception I've ever seen here," Steve said. "You can win Iowa, Barack. I can feel it. If you win Iowa, you can win the nomination." It felt sometimes as if I'd been caught in a tide, carried along by the current of other people's expectations, before I'd clearly defined my own. The temperature rose even higher when a month later, at least a few weeks before the midterm elections, my second book was released. I'd labored on it all year, in the evenings in my DC apartment, and on weekends after Michelle and the girls had gone to sleep. Even in Djibouti, where I'd scrambled for several hours trying to fax corrected page proofs to my editor. I'd never intended the book to serve as a campaign manifesto. I just wanted to present my ideas about the current state of American politics in an interesting way, and sell enough copies to justify my sizable advance. But that wasn't how it was received, by the political press or the public. Promoting it meant I was on television and radio practically nonstop. And combined with my very visible barnstorming on behalf of congressional candidates, I looked more and more like a candidate myself. On a drive down from Philly to D.C., where I was scheduled to appear the next morning on Meet the Press, Gibbs and Axe, along with Axe's business partner, David Plouffe, asked me what I planned to say when the show's host, Tim Russert, inevitably grilled me about my plans. "He's going to run back the old tape," Axe explained. "The one where you say unequivocally you will not run for president in 2008. I listened for a few minutes as the three of them began hashing out various ways to sidestep the question, before I interrupted. "Why don't I just tell the truth? Can't I just say that I had no intention of running 2 years ago, but circumstances have changed, and so has my thinking, and I plan to give it serious thought after the midterms are over?" They liked the idea, admitting that it said something about the strangeness of politics, but such a straightforward answer would be considered novel. Gibbs also advised that I give Michelle a heads up, predicting that a direct suggestion that I might run would cause the media frenzy to immediately intensify. Which is exactly what happened. My admission on Meet the Press made headlines, and the evening news. On the internet, a draft Obama petition took off, gathering thousands of signatures. National columnists, including several conservative ones, penned op-eds urging me to run. And Time magazine published a cover story titled, "Why Barack Obama Could Be the Next President." Apparently, though, not everyone was sold on my prospects. Gibbs reported that when he stopped at the kiosk on Michigan Avenue to get a copy of Time, the Indian-American vendor looked down at my picture and offered a 2-word response. "Fuck that." We had a good laugh over this. And as the speculation about my candidacy grew, Gibbs and I would repeat the phrase like an incantation, one that helped maintain our grasp on reality and ward off the growing sense that events were moving beyond our control. The crowd at my final stop before the midterm elections, an evening rally in Iowa City in support of the Democratic candidate for governor, was especially raucous. Standing on the stage and looking out at the thousands of people gathered there, their breath rising like mist through the click lights, their faces turned up in expectation, their cheers drowning out my haggard voice, I felt as if I were watching a scene in a movie, the figure on stage, not my own. When I got home late that night, the house was dark, and Michelle was already asleep. After taking a shower and going through a stack of mail, I slipped under the covers and began drifting off. In that liminal space between wakefulness and sleep, I imagined myself stepping toward a portal of some sort, a bright and cold and airless place, uninhabited and severed from the world. And behind me, out of the darkness, I heard a voice, sharp and clear, as if someone were right next to me, uttering the same word again and again. "No, no, no." I jolted out of bed, my heart racing, and went downstairs to pour myself a drink. I sat alone in the dark, sipping vodka. My nerves jangled, my brain in sudden overdrive. My deepest fear, it turned out, was no longer of irrelevance, or being stuck in the Senate, or even losing a presidential race. The fear came from the realization that I could win. Riding a wave of antipathy towards the Bush administration and the war in Iraq, Democrats swept just about every important contest in November, winning control of both the House and the Senate. As hard as we'd worked to help achieve these results, my team and I had no time to celebrate. Instead, starting the day after the election, we began charting a possible path to the White House. Our pollster, Paul Harstead, went through the numbers and found me already among the first tier of candidates. We discussed the primary and caucus calendar, understanding that for an upstart campaign like mine, everything would depend on winning the early states, especially Iowa. We ran through what a realistic budget might look like, and how we go about raising the hundreds of millions of dollars it would take just to win the Democratic nomination. Pete and Alyssa presented plans for juggling my Senate duties with campaign travel. Axelrod wrote a memo outlining the themes of a potential campaign, and how, given voters' utter contempt for Washington, my message of change could compensate for my obvious lack of experience. Despite how little time they'd had, everyone had carried out their assignments with thoroughness and care. I was especially impressed by David Plouffe. In his late 30s, slight and intense, with sharp features and a crisp yet informal manner, he had dropped out of college to work on a series of Democratic campaigns and also ran the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee before joining Axelrod's consulting firm. I sat listening one day as he mapped out how we might power a grassroots, state-by-state organizing effort using both our volunteer base and the internet. And later I told Pete that if we did this, Plouffe seemed like the clear choice for campaign manager. "He's excellent," Pete said. "It might take some convincing, though. He's got a young family." This was one of the more striking things about our discussions that month. The entire team displayed an ambivalence that matched my own. It wasn't just that my candidacy remained a long shot. Both Pluff and Axelrod were blunt in saying that for me to beat Hillary Clinton, a national brand, we would have to pitch close to a perfect game. No, what gave them more pause was the fact that, unlike me, they had seen presidential campaigns up close. They knew all too well the grueling nature of the enterprise. They understood the toll it would take, not just on me and my family, but on them and their families as well. We'd be on the road constantly. The press would be merciless in its scrutiny. A non-stop colonoscopy, I believe Gibbs called it. I'd see very little of Michelle or the kids for a year at least. 2 years if we were lucky enough to win the primary. I'll be honest, Barack, Max told me after one meeting. The process can be exhilarating, but it's mostly misery. It's like a stress test, an EKG on the soul. And for all your talent, I don't know how you'll respond. Neither do you. The whole thing's so crazy, so undignified and brutal, that you have to be a little pathological to do what it takes to win. And I just don't know if you've got that hunger in you. I don't think you'll be unhappy if you never become president. That's true, I said. I know it is, Max said. And as a person, that's a strength. But for a candidate, it's a weakness. You may be a little too normal, too well-adjusted to run for president. And though the political consultant in me thinks it would be a thrill to see you do this, the part of me that's your friend kind of hopes you don't. Michelle, meanwhile, was also sorting out her feelings. She listened quietly during meetings, occasionally asking about the campaign calendar, what would be expected of her, and what it might mean for the girls. Gradually, her resistance to the idea of me running had subsided. Perhaps it helped to hear the unvarnished truth of what a campaign entailed. Her worst fears rendered concrete and specific and therefore more manageable. Maybe it was the conversation she'd had with Valerie and Marty, two of our most loyal friends, people whose judgment she implicitly trusted. Or the nudge that she got from her brother, Craig, someone who had pursued his own unlikely dreams. First to play professional basketball, and later to become a coach, even though it meant giving up a lucrative career in banking. She's just scared, he had told me over a beer one afternoon. He'd gone on to describe how Michelle and her mother used to watch his high school basketball games, but if the score got even a little close, they'd leave and go wait in the tunnel, the two of them too tense to stay in their seats. They didn't want to see me lose, Craig said. They didn't want to see me hurt or disappointed. I had to explain that it's part of competition. He was in favor of me taking my shot at the presidency, and he said he planned to talk it over with his sister. I want her to see the bigger picture, he said. The chance to compete at this level isn't something you can pass up. One day in December, just ahead of our holiday trip to Hawaii, our team held what was to be the final meeting before I decided whether to move forward or not. Michelle patiently endured an hour-long discussion on staffing and the logistics of a potential announcement before cutting in with an essential question. You said there are a lot of other Democrats who are capable of winning an election and being president. You've told me the only reason for you to run is if you could provide something that others can't. Otherwise, it's not worth it, right? I nodded. So my question is, why you, Barack? Why do you need to be president? We looked at each other across the table. For a moment, it was as if we were alone in the room. My mind flipped back to the moment 17 years earlier when we first met. Me arriving late to her office, a little damp from the rain. Michelle rising up from her desk, so lovely and self-possessed in a lawyerly blouse and skirt, and the easy banter that followed. I'd seen in those round, dark eyes of hers a vulnerability that I knew she rarely let show. I knew even then that she was special, that I would need to know her, and that this was a woman I could love. How lucky I had been, I thought. Barack? I shook myself out of the reverie. Right, I said. Why me? I mentioned several of the reasons we talked about before, that I might be able to spark a new kind of politics, or get a new generation to participate, or bridge the divisions in the country better than other candidates could. But who knows, I said, looking around the table. There's no guarantee we can pull it off. Here's one thing I know for sure, though. I know that the day I raise my right hand and take the oath to be president of the United States, the world will start looking at America differently. I know that kids all around this country, black kids, Hispanic kids, kids who don't fit in, they'll see themselves differently too. Their horizons lifted, their possibilities expanded. And that alone, that would be worth it. The room was quiet. Marty smiled. Valerie was tearing up. I could see different members of the team conjuring it in their minds, the swearing in of the first African-American president of the United States. Michelle stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Well, honey, she said finally. That was a pretty good answer. Everyone laughed, and the meeting moved on to other business. In years to come, those who'd been in the room would sometimes make reference to that meeting, understanding that my answer to Michelle's question had been an impromptu articulation of a shared faith, the thing that had launched us all on what would be a long, rough, and improbable journey. They would remember it when they saw a little boy touch my hair in the Oval Office, or when a teacher reported that the kids in her inner-city class had started studying harder after I was elected. And it's true. In answering Michelle's question, I was anticipating the ways in which I hoped that even a credible campaign might shake loose some vestiges of America's racial past. But privately, I knew that getting there also meant something more personal. If we won, I thought, it would mean that my U.S. Senate campaign hadn't just been dumb luck. If we won, it would mean that what had led me into politics wasn't just a pipe dream, that the America I believed in was possible, that the democracy I believed in was within reach. If we won, it would mean that I wasn't alone in believing that the world didn't have to be a cold, unforgiving place, where the strong preyed on the weak, and we inevitably fell back into clans and tribes, lashing out against the unknown and huddling against the darkness. If these beliefs were made manifest, then my own life made sense, and I could then pass on that promise, that version of the world, to my children. I had made a bet a long time ago, and this was the point of reckoning. I was about to step over some invisible line, One that would inexorably change my life, in ways I couldn't yet imagine, and in ways I might not like. But to stop now, to turn back now, to lose my nerve now, that was unacceptable. I had to see how this whole thing played out. Part 2. Yes, we can.
All right, cool. I think our book club, we only had to finish part 1, so I'm done with part 1. Then my conclusion is Obama is a narcissist. That is my ultimate conclusion. Like, he is a narcissist, period. What are we doing? Nonda. But yeah, so that was cool.
Oh my God! Oh shit! Oh my God! Oh my! Holy fuck! Oh my God! Hit those people! Oh my God! Oh shit! Oh my God! Oh my! Holy fuck! Oh my God!
Can't reform this.
One dribble behind the back, door back, tap with the right pickup. 1-2 get to the body, left hand leg. Cause I've been had the world on the move. Behind the back, get that lane pickup.
Who is that? Paul George?
One dribble behind the back, door back. I'm in the community.
Tony Baker. All right, let's see what Sports Center has to talk about. Because we can watch football again, hey, guys. Conor McGregor got his ass beat, though, so there's that.
To McLaughlin. Back to Edwards. Just inside the 16. Well, there's Edwards. Keeping the Timberwolves close later in the second.
Timberwolves down 3. Edwards drives right at Williamson, and the two collide. Edwards draws the foul, goes to the line. They each had 11 points in the first half. Pelicans led by 1 going into halftime. Third quarter, Timberwolves up by 10. George McLaughlin to Edwards. Showing off the range, Timberwolves up by 13. Fourth quarter, same margin. Edwards to McLaughlin. Back to Edwards. Just inside the line for the mid-range jumper. 18 points in 20 minutes off the bench. Timberwolves get the win 120 to 110. NFL news. Lions preparing to say goodbye to Matthew Stafford, and Stafford's good with that. He expressed a desire for a trade at the end of the regular season, but the Lions wanted to wait until they got a new general manager and head coach. Stafford spoke with new GM Brad Holmes and head coach Dan Campbell, and both sides are ready to move on. Here's Jeremy Fowler.
Sources close to Matthew Stafford say the Lions quarterback simply wants to win. He wants to be in contention. He doesn't care about stats any longer. That's why many people around the league believe the Indianapolis Colts will buy for Stafford's services because they have a ready-made roster for contention right now. The only void they have is at the quarterback position. Now, the New England Patriots could get involved. The New Orleans Saints and San Francisco 49ers are teams with really strong rosters, but could have some moving parts at quarterback. And here's a sleeper team, the Washington football team. They have $35 million in cap space, a ton of intriguing young players, and I'm told that they want to go hard in finding their long-term quarterback solution right now.
Stafford spent 12 seasons in Detroit, and he's racked up some big numbers. He has the most passing yards in Lions history, nearly 30,000 more than the next closest player. His 30 wins when trailing in the fourth quarter are the most in the NFL since he entered the league, and Stafford's 282 passing touchdowns are the most by a player without a postseason victory.
If Brady and Rodgers are playing, you're not changing the channel. If we're talking about Brady and Rodgers playing, you're not changing the channel. Brady and Rodgers ahead on SportsCenter.
The fighting spirit is one we all share. Amanda Nunes wears hers with pride. From standing up for herself against the doubters, to being the only woman in her MMA training gym. Amanda refused to let stereotypes get in her way. Whether inside the octagon or out. Since 1925, we've proved that it doesn't matter where you come from.
That's my problem here. Turn off touch. Ah, damn.
My wheat farm in Utah pays for my potato farm in Idaho, which complicates my taxes.
I'll file those taxes for you. Hand them off.
Thank you. I'd rather do this than taxes.
I'm here. Hand them off.
Just landed my dream job, a full-time hand model.
Then all this is deductible. You want to hand those taxes off?
That would be nice.
File with the help of an expert. Or let an expert file for you. Intuit TurboTax Live.
Whoa, Susan.
Oh, I'm looking for coupon codes.
Well, Capital One Shopping instantly searches for available coupon codes and automatically applies them. It calls shopping smart, not hard.
But I don't have a Capital One card.
You should get one, but you don't need it for this. Just download Capital One Shopping to your computer.
Mm.
Free.
Ooh, save me some cheddar.
So, when's the party? I love fondue.
Really?
Hi.
Me neither.
I need to get through this page, which I'm done with this page, except for like the shading and the. I need to get through this page, which I should be able to do tonight. And this would be awesome.
For every NBA moment, there's a flavor on DoorDash. We all have our own journey ahead of us, our own hopes and dreams. We'll pass many milestones, moments that define you and drive you to achieve even more. So celebrate everyone, because success isn't just about where you want to get to, it's also about how you get there.
Cut on rehearsal.
The all-new 2021 Cadillac Escalade never stop arriving.
At Panera,
When we make a pizza, we don't just make a pizza. We use fresh, clean ingredients to make a masterpiece. Order our new pepperoni and 4-cheese flatbread pizzas for delivery or pickup today.
Young, black, unapologetic. That's power.
Don't miss the #1 movie on Prime Video this week. It's the best film of the year. And now it's certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. One Night in Miami. Rated R. Now streaming only on Prime Video.
Hi, Phil Swift here. People everywhere tell me how much they love the Flex Seal family of products. I think it's Seal family of products. Available at these fine retailers.
Next out, Phoenix for the Nuggets and Suns. Devin Booker out with a hamstring injury he suffered Friday night, so that's 23 points they had to try to find somewhere else. This game had a wild finish. Booker had a good seat to see it. 17 seconds left, Suns leading by 1. Chris Paul. Suns up by 3. So 6 seconds left for Denver. Jamal Murray isolated on DeAndre Ayton. And on the perimeter, the Nuggets will take that matchup. Step back 3 to tie the game. Got Ayton on the pump fake. Neil, what do I always say? Never go for the pump fake. And they're going to overtime. In overtime, Suns trailing by 1. Chris Paul still doing it. 21 points, 13 assists, 9 rebounds. Nearly messed around and got a triple-double. Suns still up 1, 32 seconds ago. Nikola Jokic spinning and winning against Frank Kaminsky plus the foul, and the Nuggets will take the lead. Final chance for the Suns. Down 3, 5 seconds ago. Jay Crowder nails the 3 with .7 to go. Crowder with 21 points, 6 threes. A second overtime. He helped with the scoring punch for Phoenix. Jokic. So smooth. Next Nuggets possession, go right back to him. Jokic, 29 points and 22 boards. Suns up 5, though, with just over a minute left. Murray. Murray finished with 26 points. I should say the Nuggets were up 5 there. Mike Malone and the Nuggets win 120 to 112. They're 9-7 on the season.
You and Aaron Rodgers have been doing this for a long time. You guys got a good team. Yeah, you too. Hey, baby. There's a lot of great things to say about his game.
What Tom does is he's always trying to work on something new.
Touchdown, Tampa Bay!
Throwing motion, the velocity on the ball, he makes it look so easy.
He's done just about everything. Kind of always from the middle of the field.
January football gonna be Ricky.
It's hard to really put into words and feel the energy. It's just different.
NFC Championship game Sunday. Couch get ready at 12:05 at our place, 2:05 Central, 3:05 Eastern. We're going to have reports from Sal Powell and Kimberly Martin, but let's check out some what's at stake here. All right, Aaron Rodgers led the NFL with 48 touchdowns during the regular season, while Tom Brady's 40 tied for the second most. Those 88 combined TD passes, second most in a season before a playoff matchup. I mean, this is just shaping up. Rodgers is 1-3 in conference championship games, has lost each of his last 3. This is the first one that's going to be at home for him, a conference championship game. Brady 9-4, most wins by a quarterback all time, and 4 more than anyone else. John Elway is next on that list. The Packers are seeking their first Super Bowl appearance since winning Super Bowl 45 and seeking to become the 5th franchise with 5 Super Bowl titles. The Buccaneers have 1 Super Bowl appearance in franchise history, beat the Raiders in Super Bowl 37. All right, Sal Palantonio, you go first.
Tom Brady's beginning to realize just how tough it is to win 3 straight playoff games on the road and get to the Super Bowl. He's never had to do that in his career. And now he comes to Lambeau without the one player he acquired to complete his offense. Antonio Brown is out with a knee injury. Good thing he's got his old pal Rob Gronkowski. Check this out. Gronkowski on his Instagram bringing a little Tampa mojo to Lambeau. Brady said all we got to do is play 4 good quarters of football to bring the Super Bowl back home to Tampa. That would be pretty cool. Now here's Kimberly Martin with the Packers.
Sal, Tom Brady may have 6 Super Bowl rings, but Packers receiver Devontae Adams has already crowned a different GOAT. No surprise, it's his quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. Brady definitely had Rodgers beat on the Lombardi Trophy front, making the Packers extra motivated to defeat the Bucs in the NFC title game and get Rodgers one step closer to a second Super Bowl win, 10 seasons after his first. Adams said Super Bowl titles have basically become a stat for content shapes his opinion. In my mind, he's the GOAT regardless of how many Super Bowls are won, Adams said of Rodgers. But just to shut everyone up, I guess we can go out there and get one for him.
Green Bay's last 6 postseason games have all hit the over. Tampa Bay, they are 3-1 against the spread this season as an underdog. And finally, it's supposed to be 30 degrees at game time since 2017. All 7 postseason games played in 30 degrees or colder have all hit the over. Cancel that play I made.
Oi, oi, oi. Mm-hmm. 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 Alright, so alright, we can hear this one. I just need to feel
At it. If it turns out that that is actually theory, I want to thank all 100.
Alright, cool.
Of my incredible patrons, guys. Thank you so much. And to everyone else listening, there's going to be spoilers for all of the series I'm going to be talking about, so tread carefully. Anthony wants to know my thoughts on the theory about God actually being the monster form of Blast, and that 2 years ago the cube somehow caused this transformation. So first of all, let me just say that I don't think Saitama and Blast were going to team up and fight God at the end of the series. That's Mastar's theory, not mine. But as for Blast being God and God being Blast, I'll say that it's certainly possible. But we just don't quite have enough information yet to really support that. And I certainly wouldn't be mad at it if it turns out that that is actually true. It would be interesting and quite the twist. But personally, I would prefer it if Blast is just like his own separate entity. You know, he's just Blast, God is God, and they're 2 different people. I think the story would benefit more from that aspect, you know, having like 2 separate storylines, because that means that Blast would have his own big moment within the series, and then, you know, God can have his own. Now, as for Blast transforming into God 2 years ago, again, certainly possible, but I feel like God is older than that. It just really seems that way. Now, I'm not going to put too much on the table of contents picture
that's the only time we've seen that stuff come up, and I don't know if that's like literally the canon or it was just a little fun that Murata was having with that drawing. We don't know yet. But it could be pointing into the direction that God exists for that long. Yes, I know that you said that the cube itself is not God, and maybe that just plays into monstrification. And that's possible too, but we just need a little more information on the stuff, which we just don't have right now. And also, going off what my math said about the history of the world, it was like over 100 years ago that like the wars happened and stuff, and then monsters kind of started to appear after that, or at least that's what it's implied. And also, Psychos had like that third eye vision of whatever she saw in high school, which was obviously more than 2 years ago. And I'm thinking that God had something to do with that. And yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that God was actually existing back then, since it is a premonition of the future. But I just think all of the information that we have right now kind of points to God being older than 2 years. And there certainly are parallels between Saitama and Blast. They've always been there, and it could be pointing towards the whole good and evil, or just the black and white elements of like absolute power within this series. But I would like to see a little more developments on the cube and God stuff before I personally start putting more faith into this.
I don't really consider it gear. It's an extension of who I am. Sometimes I can't tell myself from my machinery. I think that's by design.
Box Team asks, if Saitama's powers were theoretically able to be given away like one for all, who do you think would deserve it the most in your view or in Saitama's view? So I think he would probably give it to Moomin Rider, right? I think the story kind of dictates that, and just the way that I view Saitama's opinion on this. But if Moomin Rider declined it, which very possibly could, then I think Saitama might give it to King. So Saitama giving his power to King would actually make him as strong as everyone thinks that he is, and therefore he can continue to be, you know, that pillar of support for people. Chance asks, who do you think the top 5 strongest hockey users in all of One Piece are at the current moment? So I'm not going to put them in order, but I guess you kind of have to put the Yonko in there. I think they probably fit that bill, at least until further notice. But aside from them, I mean, I guess Aki Inu would probably be up there, and then maybe Dragon, even though we haven't seen him do anything yet, but I don't know, he probably is. But I will say, if we had to put a number 1 on that list, I'll say that it's probably Shanks. In my opinion, Shanks is kind of implied to be like the ultimate hockey user. And if the Pirate Warriors game is any indication of how he fights, he's kind of similar to Roger almost, or at least what we've seen of him. Crusader Deus Volt asks, Awaken Garo versus the organization. So it's not looking good for the organization right now, at least if we're not being generous with the speculation, because we actually just saw Destro go against Metal Bat, and I'll say that Destro seems like a solid dragon. Not an above dragon, you know, like the way that Awaken Garo is, and Eraman is probably on a similar level possibly, and then all of the G robots that we've seen are like demons, and then the one G6 Machine God Mirror was a dragon, but again, that's still not enough. So it ultimately comes down to how strong Drive Knight truly is. So if like his King form makes him above Dragon, then they would have a good chance of taking him down. But the Drive Knight that we saw against Neon, I think it would probably just play out the same way that the S-Class heroes going against Awaken Garo did. And then your second question, do you think Saitama will end up with Tatsumaki? I'm really unsure where the romance is headed in this series. I really wouldn't be surprised if it just goes nowhere. And there's just no romance at all. Like, no characters get together. I mean, that's very possible. But also, I mean, I think if Saitama does wind up with someone, guess it would have to be Fubuki, right? I mean, I think Fubuki would probably be the best candidate for that. But I guess it's also possible that it could be Tatsumaki. Delamonte asks, how do you think a fight between Toto and Fushiguro would go if they were both going all out based on current manga feats and implied potential? So I think it would probably be pretty competitive, right? I mean, if Fushiguro used like the Chimera Shadow Garden, then I guess Toto would use like a simple domain to counteract against that, and then maybe Toto might actually have like a slight advantage here because of his Boogie Woogie Clap technique, because then he can maybe even use the Shikigami that is a part of that domain to his advantage possibly. But either way, I think this would be a pretty good fight. But if Fushiguro a bit like Maharaga, then it's over. I don't see Toto being able to take him down. Beowulf asks, do you think Suiko and Saitama are going to date? So I personally think that little sequence was maybe just a little funny moment. I don't really see that going anywhere. I mean, I could be wrong, but like I've already talked about in this Q&A, I'm just so unsure about romance in this series, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if no romance is ever fleshed out, and there's always gonna just kind of be that will they, won't they thing going on. And then for your second question, what are my thoughts on Fuzzy? So the first impressions that I got from him seems like he's maybe not like full-blown evil. It seems like he might feel that he's doing the right thing, you know, with whatever he's doing, which probably ties into the prophecy to some extent. So I assume that him getting the Neo Heroes together is a similar thing to what Sitch was doing, but I don't think he's knowingly like in cahoots with the organization. I'm sure he's oblivious to the fact that they have infiltrated. And the whole cyborg thing, I think he thinks that that's probably the right thing to do, because he says it's like correcting harmful thoughts or whatever he says. So I don't think he's necessarily evil, but can be perceived that way. Garuda asks, do you think at some point Shigaraki and Deku will have to work together, perhaps to defeat All for One before fighting each other? Yeah, I think that's very likely at this point, or at least something like that will happen. I mean, it's certainly shifting in that direction, right? All for One is taking over. You know, he's using Shigaraki more than ever right now. And the whole thing about Deku saying you look like somebody that needed to be saved, so it's very possible that that may happen. But I do think they'll also wind up fighting each other regardless. L asks, who do you think could take a direct strike from a serious punch from Saitama? So off the top of my head, probably an Angel from Dragon Ball Super. If not them, then probably the Grand Priest or something like that. But aside from that, you know, just pick like any strong Marvel or DC character. I'm sure they could. Legendarius asks, I would keep your eyes peeled for a camera in your office. Metal Knight might be watching. So my FBI agent didn't tell me that anyone else was surveilling me, so I think I'm good for now, unless Metal Knight is able to surpass even the FBI agent possibly. And then your second question, will Saitama ever not be a penny pincher? I don't think so. Even if he was rich or whatever, I still think he would probably, you know, have that trait to him. I think it's, you know, it makes up a part of his character that he probably won't lose. Little Ferrari asks, how far do you see the Survey Corps from Attack on Titan making it in the One Punch Man world? I can honestly see Levi taking down some lower or even mid demons based on how crazy he is in Attack on Titan. Yeah, I think they probably could. I mean, if the Hunters, along with Excel, are able to take down demons, I don't see why the Survey Corps wouldn't be able to, especially if they had like the upgraded gear from the One Punch Man world. Mr. Awesome asks, so who are all of the S-Class heroes that you believe are at, near, or past their prime? So it's really hard to say with most, but I'll give you 5 significant ones. So Bang is obviously past his prime. Flashy Flash seems to be near it, or maybe even at it. I mean, he's so ridiculously powerful right now. Darkshine seems to be in his prime, but I'm sure he's probably going to have some kind of power up soon in the webcomic. Tatsumaki seems to be definitely near her prime, possibly. And then Atomic Samurai, I think it's safe to say that he's in his prime right now. And then for your second question, what if a lesser man of similar size wore the super tight tank top, like Great Philosopher, for example? Well, I think it ultimately comes down to if Great Philosopher truly believes in the power of the tank top. I'm thinking that's where this comes from. It seems like it's a placebo effect. I mean, maybe there is some kind of mythical or magic or supernatural ability to the tank top that Tank Top Master taps into, but until further notice, I think it's more of the power of belief, if anything. Nate Dogg asks, what if a way to fix Eri and Aizawa is Eri rewinds Aizawa but erases his quirk in the process, and this puts a limit on how Eri can use her powers? So in order for her to do that, she would have to rewind Aizawa to the point of where he was like 4 years old or 3 years old or something before his quirk manifested. She can't just erase someone's quirk factor, or at least it hasn't been pointed out that she's able to do that. And I don't think Aizawa is overpowered. I think he's being used just right within the story. I do think that somebody like him should exist, but the way that he is utilized by Horikoshi, I don't think is problematic at all. But I'm really unsure where he goes in the future of the story. I think he'll be limited regardless because of his handicap at the moment. And as for Eri being limited, I think she is limited right now because of the stipulations behind her quirk. She needs to accumulate time energy or whatever and make her horn grow. So that puts a hard time limit. small business can't afford dental. On her ability to use it and not really spam it, you know what I mean? Nico L asks, what do you think about the idea that Blue is a clone of Blast, like in Star Wars with how Jango and Boba are clones? I mean, it's certainly possible. There's a lot of unknowns with Blue right now. We don't really know the circumstances around him being the son of Blast. We don't know who the mother is. We don't know how it happened. So, you know, maybe he's a clone, but then that raises a whole bunch of other questions. It's like, how did he become a clone? Why did he become a clone? Who did it? I would say we're probably going to have to wait on this stuff before we have any evidence to support this theory, which we just really don't have right now. 8-Bit asks, how do you think Mob would do in a battle against Tatsumaki? So I honestly don't know. I haven't finished Mob Psycho yet. I haven't read the manga, so I'm only up to season 2, meaning I don't know all of Mob's feats yet. But I can tell you what one said, the guy who created both of these characters. He said that Tatsumaki would usually win, but when Mob gets serious, probably meaning his question mark percentage mode, then he doesn't know. So I take that as maybe he doesn't even really know himself. Sean H asks, I was wondering if episode 3 of WandaVision changed your mind about the show. So it kind of did. It definitely made me more interested in it than the first 2 episodes did. And even if the series winds up becoming incredible, it's not really going to change my mind about the first 2 episodes not being good. Like, I was always kind of interested in it, and I know where it's headed because I've seen the trailer. But I will say that episode 3 certainly made me more interested in the series than I ever have been, especially the end of the episode. It started to make me think that, like, Wanda wants to be there, and that this is possibly, like, her doing. The compound around that might just be keeping that under control. I don't think they, like, made that or forced her into it. And yes, I am aware of House of M, and it has something to do with her, like, having, like, a mental breakdown to some extent. So I'm thinking, you know, that's probably what's happening here. Like, she snapped or something and then formed, like, this reality bubble around her. And S.H.I.E.L.D. possibly, or S.W.O.R.D., the analog to S.H.I.E.L.D., is possibly trying to keep that contained. Snowpeas asks, what do you think the next arc after the Neo Heroes would be? So, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it's the final arc of the series. I don't want it to be, but it just seems like this arc might be wrapping up all of the other prevalent storylines within the series that isn't like the final one relating to God. And of course, I could be wrong. One is just pulling storylines out of nowhere, which I love. It just, you know, it means that this isn't such a paint-by-number series and that anything could happen. But it seems like the Neo Heroes arc is going to go on for much longer at this point. I mean, there's still a lot that needs to happen. So I really wouldn't be surprised if the next arc is just the last one. And that's also a really long arc, probably. The Skinny Giraffe asks, would you eat the jacket fruit? No, that seems like a terrible fruit to eat, in my opinion. And then which Zoan-type fruit would you eat, excluding ancient and mythicals? I like that you put those stipulations because you know that the ancient and mythicals are the most interesting ones. So I really don't want to eat any of the zone fruits that aren't ancient or mythical, but if I had to, I'd either eat like one of the bird zoans, so at least I could fly, or the human fruit, you know, the one that Chopper ate, because Oda said that like it wouldn't do anything if a human ate it, but they may become enlightened, so that would be interesting. Water Bottle asks, do you prefer the webcomic design of Blast or the manga design? So I like the manga design better if I had to absolutely choose, but like you, I do have somewhat of an issue with the Blast nameplate bubble thing because it just doesn't seem like Blast as a character, or at least...
Sometimes you just need money fast. At H&R Block, you can get up to $3,500 today. It's money when you need it. 0% interest and no loan fees. Just one of the many ways Block has your back.
Tonight, I'll be eating chicken tikka masala with garlic naan. Cheers.
We know of him, would really put that on his chest, you know, considering that it's like a hobby to him and apparently he hates being in the spotlight. It seems like he wouldn't have like a vanity piece like that on his costume, you know? But also it could just be one of Murata trying to have more parallels to Superman. You know how like Superman has the Kryptonian S on his chest? I guess this is like Blast's equivalent of that possibly. Fire54 asks, do you think Suiko might become a possible love interest of Saitama? I don't think so. I talked about this before, but I think that was mainly just a joke little throwaway sequence. I don't see that going anywhere, and like I've also said, I'm just really unsure where the romance in this series is going, period. I wouldn't be surprised if there is never any real romance, and there's just always like the what could be element of it, maybe. And then for your second question, if the multi-cube theory is real, do you think other people might have them? So yeah, it's possible. I mean, I guess Blast probably still has the cube that he had. I mean, until further notice, we're led to believe that I guess he still has it. I don't think the organization has one because they've never talked about it and there's never been any kind of evidence to show that they do have one. But as for the Monster Association mining, it's very possible that they were looking for the cube, but again, Psychos never talked about it, so I don't know at this point. But it's very likely they were looking for the cube. Psycho seems to know a lot about the finer details of the One Punch Man world, so I wouldn't be surprised if she was aware of its existence. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the video today, guys. Once again, I want to thank all 123 of my incredible patrons, and to everyone else, if you would like to be in next week's Q&A, simply check out the Patreon page. The $5 tier will give you access to this video.
Hello everyone and Merry Christmas. That Shadow of a Doubt is hilarious to me. You can check out my critique of the game for the full explanation. You know there's something malign at play when a game whose entire community is currently in open rebellion still manages to get glowing reviews on launch. Destiny 2's Eververse store. Eververse, putting every single cosmetic item worth a damn behind a dumbass paywall or an insurmountable, totally unpredictable grind. And also destroying the hopes and dreams players had for an exotic vehicle after the Dawn Chaser Sparrow tease from the first game, and also for ruining the shader system. Did I mention that 50% of the new items in the Curse of Osiris DLC are Eververse only? Oh, and the Christmas Dawning event revolves entirely around manipulating you into buying Dawning engrams for silver. Fuck you, Tess. Destiny 2's Curse of Osiris DLC. You know, I would have made a video on this were it not for the price tag. But oh man, €20 for 8 rubbish missions, an awfully designed tileset system, a tiny explorable space, a broken PvP, 50% of items being locked to Eververse, and one interesting raid encounter. $20. Sure, The Dark Below was also $20 and released in 2014 and brought even less content, but we still bought it because we love Destiny. Myself and thousands of others adored the first game, though in admittance of how slimy the pricing was. Destiny 2, on the other hand, has a community decaying into a pool of hatred and contempt for Bungie. And that was before they asked their few remaining players to cough up a third of the game's asking price for this joke. Destiny 2's Curse of Osiris DLC. Wait, didn't we just do that? No, it's one nomination for each individual instance. When I feel like it, of course, because if that rule was absolute, Eververse would have 4 nominations. Curse of Osiris locks any player who didn't buy it out of the Prestige Raid and the Prestige Nightfall. The game already had a dead endgame, so Bungie's response was to literally remove the entire thing and put it behind a paywall. Oh, and also Heroic Strikes, a feature we had from day one in the first game, are behind that paywall too. This shit writes itself. Destiny 2. No, I'm not taking the piss. Throttling XP gains without telling its player base. So basically, with each level you get a bright engram, which is code for loot box. If you want exotic sparrows, ships, emotes, ornaments, RNG boosters, and a whole lot more, you need those loot boxes. Destiny 2 throttles XP gain if you do the same thing for too long, basically to a halt, which is of course so players who want loot boxes the most are coerced into buying them. In response to the outrage, Bungie decided to double the XP requirements to get a free bright engram. Either Activision had Bungie's throat firmly gripped, or Bungie simply doesn't give a shit anymore. 10 nominations, Jesus fucking Christ. And the award goes to Need for Speed Payback. No other game in history went as far as Payback did to sell loot crates, and I honestly don't think any other game ever will. The award also goes to Shadow of War. Thanks, Warner Brothers, for ruining one of the best games of the year. Shadow of War was an excellent game, but nobody even remembers that it came out thanks to that orc merchant bastard. That's the one that makes me genuinely sick. On that note, the award also goes to Destiny 2. Yeah, I had 3 trophies manufactured. Believe it or not, it's quite cheap to tie a piece of dog shit to a stick and carve the word wanker into it. Destiny 2 had 5 nominations, but it could have had 30. Let's move on to something nowhere near as dangerous, but equally as scary. Best horror game. Nominations are Doki Doki Literature Club, Just Doki Doki Literature Club, Just Doki Doki Literature Club, and the award goes to Doki Doki Literature Club. This year's had some pretty competent horror titles, but without a shadow of a doubt, Doki Doki takes the cake. I'm not going to spoil it because it's free, which means you have no excuse not to download it and play it after this video. Just don't let the cutesy visuals fool you. This is one of the most creative and well-written horror games I've ever seen. Oh, and also maybe save it for after the holiday. I wish I'd seen more of Resident Evil 7 this year because it does seem more scary, but Doki Doki's creativity absolutely needs to be acknowledged. Next up is my personal favorite category, the coolest, most badass game of the year award. This goes to the game that had the most intense firefights, the most incredible explosions and high-octane moments. This is all about how much a game can get your blood pumping. 2017 sure had its gems in this regard. First nomination goes to Ghost Recon Wildlands. I bet the vast majority of people forgot about this game, and that really is a shame. Wildlands was unique in its design, and it pulled it off exceptionally well. A huge open-ended game. The best way to describe it would be Metal Gear Solid 5, but with slightly watered-down stealth mechanics and the scale turned up to 11 million. Screwing up a stealth encounter in this game won't mean resetting. It won't mean you have to sit on your ass waiting for the alarms to reset. It'll mean zipping over to the nearest car and dashing after the target who's more than likely hauling ass already. It'll throw a small army at you if it wants to, and when you use your gun skills, stealth, and planning to best them anyway, it can give you a high like no tactical shooter has ever done before. I can't describe how fun it was to be trapped in a building with my teammates down as I crawled my way up a staircase to avoid a never-ending barrage of bullets coming in from the window. This game can create action set pieces better than any other game without scripting a thing. It's awesome. Up next is Shadow of War. This game took Shadow of Mordor and did the same thing as Wildlands. Turned up the scale as high as it could. Fortress battles in this game are utterly incredible. Your army versus theirs. It's a real shame some of the best sieges come from the online mode. And it's not just the size of the battles that make it so good, it's your very own abilities. You can chain executions, beat people into the floor, use a giant glaive like a lightsaber, ride a dragon with total control, then dive off it and talon strike into the ground. You can shadow strike every type of enemy in every circumstance, including fly kicking an enemy off their Caragor and booting an orc off a ladder to shoot them in the face while in midair. Did I mention you can go into slow motion while flying and make Legolas look like a kid with a slingshot? And you can do the same thing while sliding? The game makes you into a tier 10 god and it's glorious. But all of that is only made better by the story itself. Celebrimbor's arena and victory speeches are some of the most badass lines ever uttered in a video game. Alistair Duncan is truly one of the best voice actors out there. Battlefield 1. This one came out in 2016, yeah, but all the maps have come out this year, and I would wager most of its playtime was logged in 2017. The game is still very much alive and kicking thanks to its addicting chaos of a multiplayer. There's nothing quite like the explosions in this game, especially the spectacle of the collapsing airship. While the power fantasy might not be there, and there's sure as hell not a shred of competitive play in the game, the chaos is like nothing else. This award was incredibly hard to choose. It came down to Shadow of War and Wildlands. I had to cut Battlefield 1 because while there are more explosions and incredible battles than any other FPS game out there, it does that at the sacrifice of pretty much every competitive element. Every time you die, the chance that you could have predicted or responded to it is shockingly low. While you can be extremely good at the game, you need to play a sniper to do so, at least on console that is. I played 330 games of Battlefield 1. My overall KD is 1.55. Now it's closest to 2.8. After all those games, I'm very rarely outside of the top 10 places on the scoreboard. I'm not very good, but I've played enough that I should have some effect on the outcome of games, right? You want to know what my win percent is? 49. 49%. My friend's win percent is 48. That right there is statistical evidence that you as a player have no control whatsoever over the outcome of games. It's cool, but not very fair. Moving on to the last two. While I think the moment-to-moment action of Shadow of War is cooler on paper, Wildlands manages to do it 100% unscripted, unaided by fancy animations, and relying on strong game mechanics alone. I can't even count the number of experiences I had in Wildlands that I will never forget. Shadow of War is more consistently badass, it just never reaches the heights of Ghost Recon. So congrats Ubisoft. I do have scripts mostly written on both games. Let's go on to the most ridiculous thing that happened in the game industry this year award. Xenoblade 2's character designs. Let's not worry about the rest of the over-designed anime bollocks, and zoom in a bit on that. What in the name of fuck is this? Why has she got a binary star system strapped to her chest? I mean, the seriously. Is her contribution to the team deflecting incoming asteroid anime bollocks? And zoom in a bit on that. What in the name of fuck is this? Why has she got a binary star system strapped to her chest? I mean, seriously. Is her contribution to the team deflecting incoming asteroids? I just want to know why. Who thought this was a good idea? Is anyone really attracted by this? She looks like her spine is so bent that it spells out the Greek alphabet. Skyrim getting re-released 2 fucking times for insane premiums in the span of 1 year after being re-released the previous year anyway, and somehow not managing to fix a single one of the game-breaking bugs that's been plaguing the game for over 6 fucking years. Honestly, Skyrim on Switch was a good idea. Who doesn't want Skyrim on the go? But I'll tell you what people do want. An actual fucking game from Bethesda, preferably one that isn't largely considered a disappointment. Every E3 for the past 3 years I've tuned into Bethesda's show just to see if they'll announce Elder Scrolls 6. The exact same effect happened with Rockstar 2. We used to have a great game every year from them, and since GTA 5 it's been microtransactions or re-releases. Yet another reason I don't want to buy the PS5 or Xbox Extra XX Xbox X. EA causing a microtransaction crash by going so far with in-game gambling that they actually got governments involved. It almost felt like a revolution. EA went too far. They didn't play it smart or safe as Activision does. They didn't try anything insidious or subtly manipulative. They never intended their system as a form of conditioning. They went in as hard and as loud as they possibly could because they just couldn't wait. They couldn't play it close to the chest as their competitors do. And finally, the torches and pitchforks actually got something done. Activision pouring about $1 billion into Destiny, making an embarrassing mess, and then getting beaten out by a free-to-play Space Ninja game. Warframe's victory was 2017. It's more popular now than ever thanks to DE's ability to make their game into whatever it needs to be. This year it needed to be a big, beautiful open world game to compete with Destiny 2. Seemingly totally out of Warframe's ballpark, but DE swung and they hit it hard. My opinion's out on Plains of Eidolons, but its effect is undeniable. Warframe is now a household name, not only due to DE's intelligence and ability, but also because so many Destiny fans quit after the disaster delivered to us at launch. Mass Effect Andromeda's animations. How? Well, half the blame goes over to the development of Andromeda, and the other half goes to EA forcing every game they have to use Frostbite. This game is just depressing. PUBG's Xbox One optimization. It's not even the console. How can a game that looks like it could have been released 5 years ago run this poorly? How do you achieve that? This isn't just an Xbox issue. People with GTX 1080s are having trouble with this game's frame rate. It's slapstick, as Crobecat shows. Warframe losing the ongoing game award to Overwatch. I don't know if the judges were high or bought off, but there's something fishy going on when a game that's reinvented itself from the ground up multiple times since launch loses out to a game that's released, 4 new characters and a couple of new maps? Even if we restrict everything to the year of 2017, Warframe wins by an even bigger margin. Going open wild, introducing a whole new style of play along with a cinematic questline and implementing a new mod system somehow loses to 2 new playable characters and a handful of maps. In what universe? The award goes to Skyrim. It's not that it got re-released for full price. It's because good developers that were once considered legendary, who put out genre-defining games annually, now rely on microtransactions and re-releases instead of actually developing video games. I want Rockstar and Bethesda back. Moving on to most anticipated game. Darksiders 3. When Darksiders 3 was announced this year, I almost died from a heart attack. Darksiders 2 is my second favourite game of all time, and Death is my favourite protagonist of anything ever. I adore these games in the Darksiders universe. Sadly, not long after Darksiders 2's launch, THQ was shut down and Visual Games along with it. The remnants spread all over the place, mostly to Crytek, but eventually they decided to get back together, go independent, and start working on Darksiders 3. And I couldn't be happier. Fury looks incredible, the art and graphics are top-notch once again, the combat looks like a blast. I am optimistic and I can't wait to get my hands on it, hoping for a late 2018 release. Spider-Man PS4. Iron Man is my favourite superhero, followed closely by Batman. But Spider-Man's always been up there too, and that's less down to his on-screen portrayals, but rather his video games. Spider-Man 2 and Ultimate Spider-Man are of course classics, but Web of Shadows is not only my favourite Spider-Man game, but also one of my favourite games ever. The combat, the collectibles, the story, and above all of those, the atmosphere. There's nothing like swinging through a bustling New York with the sun's yellow gaze beaming off the windows of skyscrapers and offices. After Web of Shadows, we had Shattered Dimensions and Edge of Time. I really liked the first, but not really the second. Not one of them had that New York superhero Spider-Man feel. Then The Amazing Spider-Man comes along. A movie tie-in. must be awful then, right? Not quite. I actually really like the first Amazing Spider-Man. I love the story, but most of all, the large-scale combat which no other Spider-Man game has done since. You would have to fight bosses bigger than skyscrapers in this city with no help at all. Eventually, you'd get chased by a mutant-seeking drone which would immerse you into high-speed, explosive, dynamic boss fights that had more spectacle than both of the movies combined. It was amazing. Sadly, Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a bit crap, and since then it's been radio silence. Until now. Insomniac have shown off their new Spider-Man game with the most beautiful rendition of New York there's ever been. There's satisfying swinging, interesting combat, an intriguing story, and an awesome new suit. Spider-Man PS4 has me hooked. I couldn't be more hyped. Far Cry 5. I love Far Cry 4. I was actually going to do a video on it until I realized how large an undertaking that would be, and of course that nobody would watch it. Far Cry 4 was one of Ubisoft's best. Incredible dynamic combat, satisfying FPS mechanics, jaw-dropping graphics, and an awesome story created one of the best open-world gaming experiences that I'd ever had. They were straying from the survival aspect of the game and going all in on the action focus. Far Cry 5 seems to be taking that even further, and I can't wait to see what they do. The Crew 2. After my 2 videos on the Need for Speed series, I was about ready to give up on the racing genre. I'm not big into sim racing anymore, and I couldn't play Forza Horizon 3 thanks to its exclusivity. The Crew 2, however, looks like a blast. It's basically my only hope for the future of open world racing after the embarrassment that was Need for Speed Payback. Days gone. This doesn't look like the proper zombie survival game I've been after since the dawn of time, but it has at least got the zombies right. There's a fuck ton of them, and you can use them to your advantage. It looks like a load of fun. There's dynamic events, what seems like really cool motorcycle handling, and incredible graphics. Let's just hope they don't make the game too easy, because that could totally destroy the horror element you'd get from being chased by a horde of 1,000 zombies. Sadly, next up is most disappointing game of the year, Destiny 2. God fucking damn it. After the constant shit Destiny got even after the Taken King, everyone in the community saw Destiny 2 as salvation. Finally, people would see what had us all addicted. Finally, the dumbass people still play this game, comments would stop. You know what's happened now? Destiny's community is dead. Gone. Buried. There's a small skeleton crew of people who do still find the game fun, but the vast majority of the community is either gone or only playing the game because they have to. That took how long? 3 months? The first game's community lasted for 3 years. Destiny 2 has no endgame, a ridiculous token loot system, dumb, poorly written contradictory lore, predatory microtransaction systems, bad loot, a bad raid, bad strikes, bad nightfalls, awful crucible, dumbed down gameplay, unbalanced subclasses, a depressingly bad weapon system, crap story, bad mission design, a hugely disappointing final boss, awful characters, only 2 good explorable spaces, 1 disappointment and 1 total failure, bad overpriced DLC, and the dumbest, most idiotic progression systems I've ever seen from a looter shooter. Destiny 2 was going to be my game of the year. It was going to be Destiny's salvation. Instead, it's a bullet in the head and Destiny's cremation. Mass Effect Andromeda. I forgot this game even existed until it came out on Origin Access. God, I wish it hadn't. Andromeda is saddening. We were going to a totally new galaxy. Imagine all the things BioWare could dream up. All the forms of life, all the technology. What do we get? Humanoid, insect-looking dickheads who have human-like intelligence, use human-like technology and weaponry, and have human-like motivations. Fucking brilliant. There's also an ancient alien race who disappeared but left their technology behind, which is, of course, sleek-looking block structures with energy flowing through them, because that's never been done before. You had a new fucking galaxy. You could have dreamt up anything, and you gave us the most boring, generic crap imaginable, along with the most embarrassing dialogue and animations I've ever witnessed. Fuck's sake, BioWare. Need for Speed Payback. I told everyone to be optimistic at the end of my Need for Speed series retrospective. What a fucking joker they must think of me now. Payback had a good story, fun off-roading, competent graphics, I'll give it that. It also had dumbed-down car customization, a tiny map, bad tuning, an awful car class system, mediocre handling, no sense of speed, a bad multiplayer, and of course the most predatory, most disgusting implementation of microtransactions I do believe there's ever been. Let's play a game of Guess the Publisher. Yeah, Payback wasn't without its merits, but it sure as shit is without my respect. Goodbye, Need for Speed. Battlefront 2. I just wanted a fun little multiplayer game to play over Christmas. Last year was Battlefield 1, and there wasn't going to be another Battlefield until the next year, so Battlefront 2 was where I was looking. Free maps and lots of them, a proper campaign, cool new gameplay. It had it all. EA Battlefront's redemption. No. You see, Battlefront 2 had one problem. EA. To no one's shock, the award goes to Destiny 2. I don't know if there'll be a Destiny 3, and after Destiny 2, I don't care. The next one is a very conditional category. The award 2. This time, it's personal. It's all about sequels. First nomination is Titanfall 2. Titanfall, the original one, had a really fucking great multiplayer, but it also had an unfair price tag, exclusivity, boring graphics, and no campaign. It was forgotten about. Then Titanfall 2 comes along and systematically fixes every single one of the first game's flaws. No campaign. We made the best FPS campaign in years. Boring graphics. We froze an explosion in time. Exclusivity. Not anymore. The only thing that regressed in my eyes is multiplayer balancing, but the multiplayer is still one of the best around. With free DLC, cool maps, fun progression, and the incredible interplay between Titan and Pilot, Titanfall 2 is still the cream of the crop. Shame the release schedule, lack of marketing, and consumers put it to death. Titanfall 2 was less of a redemption, more of a victory. Watch Dogs 2, however, was both. Watch Dogs 1 is probably now remembered as awful, but even at the peak of the outrage, few people thought it was bad. It just wasn't very good, as promised. In fact, almost nothing had came out as Ubisoft had shown. It's sad because at least the graphics wouldn't have had to take that hit if it weren't for how dogmatic the industry is about keeping console and PC experiences as close as possible. Regardless, the game was looked back on as one of the greatest gaming letdowns of all time, and this was in the same year as vanilla Destiny, so Watch Dogs 2 had some fucking work to do. And by God, did it deliver. Everything from the city to the clothes options was overhauled. Stealth, story, hacking, graphics, driving, skills, everything. The only regressions made were maturity and gunplay, in my opinion. Otherwise, Watch Dogs 2 is an incredible example of a sequel done right. It didn't sell well, to no one's surprise, and that genuinely is a shame. I have not only hope, but genuine excitement for Watch Dogs 3, and I will be covering 2 in an upcoming video. Shadow of War. Fuck, I've already explained how upset I am at this game for being overlooked, but addressing it as a sequel alone, Shadow of War is a masterpiece. Bad story last game, good story this game. Bad boss fights last game, pretty good boss fights this game. Excellent nemesis system. Hugely expanded, even more excellent nemesis system. Small-scale battles even in strongholds. Assaulting fortresses and fighting entire armies. Ridiculously easy endgame to the point that all replay value disappears and content creators have to let themselves die because it's the only way they can ever lose. Well, this time there's a difficulty slider, thank God. The list goes on. Skill trees, level design, graphics, beasts, animation quality. I can't name a single aspect of the game I truly believe is worse than Shadow of Mordor aside from those goddamn fucking loot boxes and the true ending crap. The award goes to Titanfall 2. Watch Dogs could have had it, but Titanfall went from no campaign to setting an example to all FPS developers out there. Its campaign isn't just good, it's genre-defining. Among giants like Halo, Modern Warfare, and Doom. Above them in places. I have a video on it if you'd like to hear more, but given its price and given the time of year, it's probably best you play it yourself. Buy it. So now it's time for the Game of the Year. I'd have said here and now that the award goes to Titanfall 2, but I'm not going to stretch my rule over to the most important award. I bloody wish I'd have played any actual games that came out this year. Persona, Nier, Hollow Knight,
Alright,
Mario.
mission accomplished.
I played Destiny fucking 2 speed. I'm glad I never actually paid for this shit so the title wouldn't feel like a stab in the gut payback. The nominations are as follows. Doki Doki Literature Club. This was a 5-hour mindfuck. I say mindfuck, it wasn't exactly...
Alright, party people, I'll catch up with you later. Thanks for joining me. 1 hour complete. Oh wait, let me check.
Built up tension and suspense masterfully if you didn't have it spoiled for you, which you better believe